Yeah.
Oh wow, popcorn and frigid.
Yeah. See, we are really in Vegas in Adobe Summit, and that's a great example. We're trying to woo people with popcorn.
Welcome to the Future of Podcasts, where I deep dive into discussions with remarkable founders and industry experts, and together we explore the challenges of today and how they are innovating through them to shape a brighter tomorrow. Today I'm in conversation with Arun Manoharan, Director of Product Management at Adobe, with a specific focus on what may be referred to as trust capabilities within the Adobe Experience Platform, allowing organizations to be regulatory ready and operationally agile while reducing risk to business and delivering best-in-class consumer experiences. In this episode we discuss designing technology to be region, industry, and regulatory agnostic, moving from regulatory readiness through to exceeding community and customer expectations, the future of privacy-enhancing technologies, accountability, responsibility, and transparency in AI, data stewards being empowered by AI agents in the age of agentic AI, among other things. Now, I've had the fortune of working with Arun over the last 5 years, and I've always been very inspired by his open, collaborative, curious, and customer-centric approach to product management, which has given rise to some of the best-in-class capabilities being adopted by leading organizations across the globe. And with that, I'm excited to present to you Arun Manoharan, Director of Product Management at Adobe. Welcome. Welcome to the conversation. We're here at Summit, Adobe Summit 2025 in the Venetian Conference Center. And I'm always very surprised when coming to conferences this large. It's pretty epic and a lot of energy around. And Arun, welcome to the podcast. I'm very excited. I've been trying to have a conversation with you for a while now.
Yeah.
I've had the pleasure of working with you on and off over the last few years. I've always been very, very struck and very much appreciated your approach to product management, being very open and collaborative, and the amount I've learned from you as well. So been very excited to have the conversation. So just to kick us off, I was hoping you could just give us a bit background on yourself and what you're focused on.
No, absolutely. First of all, I would like to say thank you, Ian. I know we've been wanting to have this conversation like 2 years ago, right? So I'm very happy that it's happening today in Las Vegas in Adobe Summit. And I think we've known each other for, I would say, 5 years plus, because when we started building Adobe Experience Platform, some of the foundational elements, we started putting the right structure in place around data, trust, and activation and intelligence. And I remember still when we were talking about trust and building the data usage labeling enforcement framework, you reached out to us for like feedback, and then like you helped improve the product like with your feedback. So that I still have that memory, because the people that I used to work with, the PM for that product, he used to tell me like, Ian from Australia has a lot of good insights, but also how governance should be applied in big enterprises, right? So thank you for all your feedback back in the day, but also like continuing for the last 5 years, giving us a lot of feedback, but also like helping Adobe build better products with privacy in mind. So thank you for that. I'm very happy to be here. Just a quick introduction about myself. My name is Arun Manoharan. I'm a Director of Product at Adobe, specifically working on Experience Platform for the past 8 years. And I would say the last 5 years of that, I've spent a lot of time focusing on privacy, governance, trust, responsible AI, and a few other initiatives within Experience Platform.
Yeah, great. And I'm glad you kind of unpacked that a little. So Director of Product Management, but again, a specific area of that area of known as trust. So you kind of already alluded to privacy, responsible AI. How do you approach this broad topic of trust? And as you break it down into those key themes, how do you think about, what we're doing now, what we need to think about in the future, in the context of building a platform that's leveraged globally? And the reason I say that is because obviously each region, state within regions, countries, etc., have their own regulatory nuances. Each business has their own policy nuances. So how do you attack something so broad and complex from a product perspective?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I would I would always start with the consumers in mind. First, what is a consumer's expectation? For example, I personally, when I deal with any particular brand, I have a specific set of expectations from that particular brand in terms of are they transparent with me? Are they giving me the right controls? How do this brand make me feel? Right? Like, are they making me feel creepy? Right? Be a little bit more creepy. So that it kind of like translates that into how data is being collected, how data is being stored, but also how is data being utilized within a big enterprise. And a lot of times what I have seen happen is some of the privacy initiatives focus just on the data piece, on like how the data is organized. But very rarely I've seen those governance take effect when people within an enterprise are using that data. To me, like the number one paradigm shift I've seen in the last few years is making sure when you're collecting data from your consumers or your customers, start with your privacy by design at that point and make sure every step of the journey you have the right amount of privacy by design principles, not only in your talk track, but also how do you bring it to life through products, through solutions in your workflow, so that someone in your organization who is using data doesn't have to think about like 10,000 different things that they have to worry about. They can actually like go and assume that the right governance principles are applied in the data. So when I use it for a particular purpose, all the controls are taken into effect. Yeah. So that's why I would always start with putting the consumers front and center, and then like thinking about privacy principles from, I think they call it the shift left, all the way from collection to storage to usage, and then making sure that there are, we don't put the heavy burden on the people who rely on the data to be making like on-demand decisions as to whether they're compliant or not. So that's one angle. I think you're also asking a question around how does enterprises get ready? Number one is they should always think of privacy as a principle or a value that the brand should be known for. Number two, they have to adhere to complying with their regulations in their particular geography. But if you're starting your journey in privacy with consumer in mind, 9 out of 10 times I've seen that principle actually helps them comply with regulations much faster. So they don't have to wait for a new regulation to pop up and then like create a privacy program. Everything is like already baked in.
Yeah, there's some really great points. And I think just some of the points you've alluded to is this concept, which again, something we spoke a lot about in market around having a regulatory focus versus more the community expectations, so meeting community and or customer expectations. And I think what we find organizations that focus on, to your point, the end customer, the end user, they automatically in most cases, tick the regulatory box as well.
Yeah.
So again, focusing on the end customer and the community they're serving and making sure they're not just meeting, but exceeding those expectations, which I think is a really great point. Another point I think I picked up there was, and I think I've observed the same thing. A lot of conversations around governance kind of start and revolve around labeling, semantics, and access control.
Right.
But what I think they're missing is the nuance of labeling, the nuance of access control and the granularity, but also the usage control. So even those who have access to the right data, they can't even accidentally use it for the wrong reasons. Right. And that's a big gap, I think, in a lot of conversations I've seen with organizations. And the last part is, so we've got access control, usage control, but broader policy enforcement, which I know you've been absolutely instrumental in driving. And this idea of outside of what, you know, customers want in terms of their consent and or preferences. What as a business or an organization do we need to enforce from a business policy perspective? One example might be, hey, it really doesn't matter what you opt in or opt out of. The fact that you're a platinum subscriber means we're never going to send you certain advertising or marketing. Yep. Or if we've identified you as, in financial distress, we're going to suppress you from certain messaging or products, etc. And again, same could be said across different industries. So I think what you're alluding to there becomes really, really impactful and important into businesses. Do you see differences across industries when you talk to, or is there any cases? Is it mostly that it all boils down to the same capabilities we need to build, or are there any nuances per industry in your experience?
No, that's a great point. And as you pointed out, data labeling and data catalog has been in the industry for the last 15, 20 years, ever since data warehousing started. And access control as a system to control who has access to the data has helped like a lot of organizations secure their data. And as you pointed out, when we started on the journey of building Adobe Experience Platform, we wanted to go beyond that and say, hey, really, are we helping the practitioners who are using data for their living every day to make the right decisions as it to send the best campaign, or for like even analyzing the campaign results, or even like activating a particular audience to an ad network destination? And as you pointed out, some of those policies or rules can be codified, right? And that's where like having an extensible policy framework. Today, I'm sure like 90% of the brands have these policies in their legal documentation or like sitting in a cupboard somewhere. But I'm sure like every time they have a question, they're working with 5 different teams to get approvals, right? And that is the part that we said, like, hey, can we create a policy framework which is completely customizable per use case? Because who knows, the purposes can change in the future, as in when new technologies come in. With AI, I'm sure like there'll be a lot more data use purposes that are being introduced. So how can we build a framework that can easily be extended to different kinds of use of data? So that's number one. And then I think to your question of how does it apply to different industries, I think I go back to the example of what you shared with us around in Australia, around the media companies and the scrutiny they are facing with the regulators, but also like the brands wanting to take more of a proactive approach in terms of building the right controls in place. So I always seen, obviously like healthcare, financial services, and the highly regulated customers are much more advanced and are much more conservative in terms of like making sure they're using the right controls in place and then choose the right technology to do that. But I think that learnings that we had from the regulated industries, we are seeing all brands across different industries are wanting to use privacy as a differentiator and are already like taking lead in terms of making privacy their principle in how they approach their business. But definitely there is nuance, not only in privacy, but even in platforms, data warehouses. It used to be, oh, it's data lake. You dump your data, you use data with queries. But I think more and more we are finding that the domain expertise that sits within these organizations and then the people in those organizations bring in a lot of domain expertise. And I think with AI agentic revolution, domain expertise is going to be even more important because what do you do after you store the data? How do you get meaning out of the data? Varies from industry to industry. And I think with privacy, it's the same pattern that I think it follows.
Yeah, and there's a few, just take some notes. There's a few really good, I think, points you make there. Historically, some of this isn't new. I mean, this has existed in data warehouses for many years. And I think our experience, one of the, not challenging, but I think one of the, areas that the IT team, let's say, is more cautious of is, well, we've spent all this time, effort and money securing the, foundational data layer, let's say, or the infrastructure, the data warehouses, etc. If we now, allow different parts of the business, marketing, digital, whatever the case may be, to access some of this, we're going to drop the bar in terms of our governance. But to your point, it shouldn't be the case. In fact, with a lot of these capabilities in, things like the Adobe Experience Platform, we actually not just, conserve the benchmark, but we actually enhance that through the additional capabilities. So I think that's one. And why do we want to do that? To unlock more value from the data, get more access to the right data, but only the right data, not the wrong data you don't have. But again, just to unlock more value to the business for the data. And
I have an example as you were summarizing it. I remember a particular customer wanted to get to near real-time activation. But then I found out that they're creating these really best-in-class audiences, and they're shipping the audience definition and a sample record to a lot of different organizations within their enterprise to get approval on whether this data can be used for this purpose or not. And the few weeks later, that audience is probably not useful anymore, right? It becomes so stale. So how can we automate that process and make things that should be easy or can be repeatable in terms of policies can actually be codified into the system? That added tremendous value in terms of just productivity in general for the whole organization that we worked with.
Move to some of the innovations you and the team are starting to look at. And this wonderful term, let's say, of privacy enhancing technologies, something I'm very excited about, but it is a very umbrella term. In your view, like, can you break that down for the audience and give your view on how you approach these, what areas they do and don't live, and again, how that's unlocking additional value, for organizations, and you kind of alluded to the next generation of AI, Gen AI, but also agentic AI now coming into the fold. How is that improving the quote unquote privacy enhancing technologies?
Yeah, no, I think that's a very loaded question, because we can talk about privacy enhancing techniques for another hour. I can take a few use cases, right? Within a particular organization, if there are data sets that are being collected about particular individuals, and that could have personal data, demographic data, or a little bit, let's say even sensitive data. Oftentimes, when the data practitioners are using data, they just want to have access to more of their events and behavior data rather than knowing exactly who that person is, right? So even within a particular enterprise, you can start thinking of, can we anonymize to an extent that where it's very hard to re-engineer and figure out who exactly this person is, because that data is really not needed. So think of that as anonymization or obfuscation. But I think techniques like differential privacy, where it's so hard with all technologies that you apply and how much of a compute power that you have, it's very hard to go back to the real text value that will expose some of the personal data. So it can, as simple as the use case as just data sharing or data usage within a particular enterprise. And then I can think of where two particular brands are partnering with each other, and they want to be sharing data between them. And can they do it in a privacy safe manner? And then there you can think of technologies like clean sketches that we have in real-time CDP, or you can even think of that as a marriage between two data sets, which is only applicable for a particular purpose and only stays for a particular timeline where that handshake is happening, and then you forget the relationship between the two data sets. So those kind of technologies are really getting important. I think where it's going is with a lot of companies investing time in building AI models, or using data with Gen AI. Oftentimes they don't want to send the personal data to any of the chat GPTs of the world, right? You might want to strip out certain data and only send the contextual elements that are really useful to make changes in the product. So I think privacy enhancing techniques make a big difference in that area. And also even for data scientists within a particular organization or data analysts, even though they may have access to the data, maybe even they can use it for a particular purpose. Can you strip out certain elements so that you can't re-engineer a particular data to the individual?
So I think there's a few things there. One, talking to the use case approach. So only, and again, the principles of data minimization along the same lines, only leverage what you need to, but then having different methods like obfuscate, encrypt, et cetera. Interestingly, one of the biggest challenge I've found talking with customers, privacy teams, marketers, digital teams, et cetera, is, funny enough, more around the language. And with this shift now to all these new innovations coming out around privacy enhancing technologies, we're still leveraging some older language that we need to rethink. Because part of the getting customers on board is really just the education piece.
Yeah.
So I have, privacy teams asking us well, we can't move or shift or expose this data. And we're like, oh, hold on. Let's take a step back.
Right.
When part of your team may use the term, I think data sharing, technically we're not actually sharing data. What we're doing is running a whole bunch of, encryption and blue filters or whatever the case may be. The Adobe the sketches you alluded to. We don't move. We don't expose. We don't leverage certain data. But what we do is unlock the value of that data.
Right.
So that data collaboration, I think those conversations are really interesting because there's aha moments.
Yep.
With a lot of, customers, et cetera. and privacy teams, obviously. And then, I think they, first the aha moment of, oh, okay, that actually ticks the box in terms of our requirements, our policies, our privacy notices, etc. Unlocks this use case. But then hold on, this actually unlocks a whole bunch of other use cases for us. The insights from a business perspective, the way in which you can create partnerships, whether long-term or short-term within different businesses across different industries as well. Again, all while respecting, the end consumers, your customers, whether B2B or B2C, obviously their privacy, etc. So it's incredibly exciting area you and the team are absolutely innovating in. And again, the education piece is something that, is actually the biggest challenge, not the technology. How do you think about that in the next wave of like education around, and I don't want to say positioning, but like documentation, like how do you educate, certain personas, something quite complex in terms of the technology behind the innovation, while still, making sure people are getting the value of that. The privacy part.
Absolutely. And I think that's a great summary of what's happening. The problem that I see as well is there are people that are organized, there are teams within a big organization that are responsible for measuring, managing, reduce risk over time. And then there are people in the legal, the security department, like trying to make sure they're complying with the regulations, but also securing the data. And 90% of the times their main motivation is, do we have enough controls to reduce risk? So when they see a new technology, the first question they'll come in like, hey, we can't use it, right? And then you unpack like, why can't you use it? Okay, is the data secured? Okay, what do you mean by data secured, right? And you can't just say yes. And they'll be like, is it encrypted? Okay, what's the type of encryption? So I think it goes back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And I think like what we have seen, with at least personally in my journey in Adobe, building Adobe Experience Platform from day one, we have a pyramid, that we think about all the way from the foundational security, principles and features like encryption, access control, regional control, like the data is stored within a particular region within your own data center. And then on top of that, you can, think of, are we providing like right amount of isolation between customer data, right? And then also within a particular customer, there could be like multiple organizations. They want to control
different brands
and different teams. So do we have enough controls around like sandboxes and whatnot? So above that layer, there is this level of, what we call the data usage labeling enforcement, which is our governance layer, which is more around, can we allow customers to classify data and create the policies that we talked about earlier? And then on top of it, you have this whole notion of putting the control back in the consumer's hand with collecting the right consent and preferences. But I think like once you start explaining the,
So we're going to pause for a second while. This is guerrilla podcasting as we speak. Sorry.
Oh, that's funny. So think of like just explaining that, from unpacking it from all the way from foundational security to governance to privacy and putting the consumers. And then obviously like the question of how can you use all this security, privacy, governance functionalities to help our customers comply with their regulations or even their corporate policies. Explaining that has been like, very hard. But I think like I usually go in with like, let me show you the product, right? Like, let me show you the privacy controls in practice. And I've seen majority of the times that I kind of like unlocks and reduces their risk, temperature. And then they're able to, see, those controls in action. And I think that's the best way to do it. And I think I'm seeing the same thing repeat with AI adoption, right? A lot of customers or the folks within the organization want to adopt AI, and their legal team is rightly asking them, hey, can you give more details around what kind of AI outcomes are we going to create? What kind of tools are we using? Do we have the right controls? Do we have the right contract languages? And one step further, they'll go and ask, do we have enough explainability of the things that the AI system is giving back? And then do we have things like bias detection, drift detection for AI models? And then as simple as they will be like, hey, all the ML models do you guys use? Do you have model cards and the documentation that's available so that like I at least know like what kind of data is being used for training these models and can I control them? So I think that's what I'm seeing in terms of where the industry is going with respect to enabling educating the customers. And I think we are educating ourselves as we learn.
Yeah. And I think because I've come across this a lot of times, there's the role within a business, whether it's legal, privacy, where some other parts of the business just view them as they're paid to say no. That's their job, to tell us no.
Right.
But through these conversations, these teams actually, when taken on the journey, when educated and shared the context and the details, they actually very quickly turn to advocates because they understand, we can. And I've had this experience with several customers, one of which, won't name customers, but a high-tech company, through the GDPR process. A lot of the organization was quite worried that everything gets shut down, but because they were forced, because of the regulatory changes, they were forced to look at what they could and couldn't do. They had to work very closely with privacy and legal, but at the end of the process, they actually knew the guardrails and they could do more than they thought they could. And just through that process of education. So I think that, and we're seeing that kind of replay, history repeat itself with the Australian privacy reforms. Yeah. And I'm sure similar scenarios in the US with all the different regulations across that. You mentioned one thing, which you might be interesting to dive into. So the transparency, the AI transparency piece. Because I know it's a bit of a dilemma. Like, as you introduce more transparency into AI, you also run risk of it, potentially being able to be leveraged by bad actors in certain ways. I won't go into the detail on the end-to-end of AI, but I think what you and the team have done a really great job at is introducing features, functions, capabilities, which actually put transparency around the end-to-end process, not just the model.
Yeah.
So I think one example is things like, lookalike modeling. You've got attributes, attributes that contribute, and there's a few others like influential factors,
right.
All that sort of stuff. So again, from a brand perspective, when they're thinking about regulations and the wording around some of those regulations, they're making the best possible effort to give transparency, clarity, and control around what data is and isn't used on models and all that sort of stuff. So I just wanted to unpack that a bit further and like how you're thinking in terms of that. How do we add more transparency, clarity, and control from an AI perspective? Going back to your responsible AI position earlier.
I would start with, again, what are the principles of responsible AI? Accountability, responsibility, transparency, right?
The art of
AI. But I think there could be more. And let's start with just being transparent around what kind of data is being used for training. Are the right controls were in place for training data collection and training data storage and usage? And even how prompts are being used for fine-tuning models, and then where is this data stored? Where does this data go in like an enterprise, or in what systems are they getting stored, and how are they secured? Who has access to it? Just making sure a lot of this information, I call it the metadata of an AI model. I think there are great ideas like model cards, which Adobe also will start to release some model cards for our AI models, which is a great first step in terms of building that transparency of getting more information on what these AI models are. Number two, with our AEP AI assistant, what we have done is all the responses that we are giving back to the user, we're making sure we are quoting the source when we are collecting that data, and then also make sure that all the responses are grounded in the data that a particular customer has brought in, so that there is no sharing of information between any brands. So it's like very specific custom models per customer and how it's deployed. And I think like having more and more features around just explaining like some of the operational insights that you can get from API Assistant. What was the SQL query that ran in the background in order to generate that insight, and what interval did it run, like how old it is? So giving more information or metadata around the response itself like adds a lot of trust between the user and the system that they're using. So to me, like that actually builds a lot of trust. And then number three, as you said, is how do we make sure that the users feel comfortable in using the product is also like whether they have control around if they want to opt out of using a certain feature because their organization have stricter rules, they should be able to turn on, turn off, and give them more control.
Yeah. Also, and just on the agent piece, the AI agent, there was some really exciting announcements at Summit here at the Adobe Summit. Really like agentic AI taking off, more autonomous agents being able to work with each other, and the commitment of not just being open and extensible for the broader ecosystem, but can you talk a bit about the guardrails that organizations may need to consider, what we're doing about that, and also the types of personas that may start leveraging them? So we think about someone who wants to create an audience, but do we think about, I don't know, the privacy team that get access to the Adobe tools and say, hey, agent, tell me my risk factor, or should I be turning on more governance tools? And we're like, where am I at? Considering like a customer has full control over what they do and don't use. So that again, agent, that helper, which says, we noticed that you're not using labels as much as you could, or you don't have policies around these themes. What are your thoughts around that area and how we can potentially help customers moving forward?
Yeah, man, this is why I love talking to you, because every time we have talked, you always give me like 10 ideas that I can build in the roadmap for the next year or year and a half. So keep doing that. It's good for my job security. With the way that we are approaching agents, as we announced, more around certain important aspects of a marketing journey, be it creating audiences, creating journeys, or creating the right content for various purpose. And the way most of our users of Adobe Experience Platform applications are involved in certain aspects. Some of them are very focused on building the right data set, making it ready for marketing operations and the marketing technology teams, or even marketers to make use of the data, build audiences, and create journeys. So all the way from like data onboarding agent to, can the system tell them based on the use case what kind of schema should we create, and can we actually go create it for them instead of having them go click in 10 different areas? So like just knowing the semantic understanding of that particular prompt and like turning it into a workflow. The same thing with audiences. Why should nobody wakes up in the morning and says that, hey, I want to create the best audience today? But maybe they have a good idea for a campaign and they want to know what kind of audiences are possible based on the data that's being stored in their customer data platform. So think of practitioners who are using different parts of our AEP application would be able to leverage the very specific skill agent, like audience agent or journey agent or data agent, to help bootstrap their workflows. And to your question about privacy agent, that's like an idea that we started, but like as you were alluding to, a lot of organizations have I would say data privacy analysts or privacy stewards or data stewards sitting in a different org, and they may be intimidated by using a marketing application or like a customer experience management solution. But I think what AI agents do is they can interact in natural language and ask their query around, hey, tell me all the data sets that are not used or not governed or not labeled. At least they can go have the right conversation with the data teams to say that, hey, I found out like we have 100 data sets. Out of that, 50 has never been used and 20 of them have sensitive data. Should we, can we like properly label it? And actually AI assistant came and told me what label to apply, what kind of retention policies to apply. So I think that's where the roadmap and the industry is going. And I think I'm sure like in 2025 and, early 2026, we will have some of the skill set of a data steward in our agent.
Yeah. And I think like going back to that open extensible point, as you say, if like a privacy steward doesn't work in certain tools or products, but they do in others, there's no reason we can't open that up, that they work in their tool of choice, but it's still feeding in to and from the Adobe the tools, etc. Another one that kind of just struck me as you were saying that, and I'm sure this is part of your challenge, so I'm keen to get your thoughts here. Having a quote privacy agent, awesome. But at the same time, privacy bubbles up into each and every other area. Content, audience creation. You mentioned create my schema. You know, it could be argued that, well, that same agent should know how to label it and how to, you know, without obviously, well, won't go into the nuances of schemas, but
Yeah.
yeah, you get my point. So I think, is that a challenge that we need to start thinking about now in terms of specific agents, specific tasks, but also much like our models, they just bubble up capability across the whole Adobe ecosystem. Do we need that fundamental learning to bubble up into the rest of the ecosystem?
No, I think you said it right. Some of these, agents will be very specific. Some of them will be headless where multiple agents are interacting. And I think it goes back to the guardrails. For example, for an audience agent, that if you're using it for creating an audience for a specific purpose and there is a guardrail around like, hey, I'm in healthcare. I want this audience to be built in a way that I respect honor the end consumer's preference as to do they want to be reached out for a particular diagnostics or not. And the agent should be aware of it. And then in the back end, that agent can be orchestrated by a different agent, like a data steward agent, and inform the audience agent as to what the guardrails are. I think, like, as you said, like that may be one way of how to frame these agents, which some of them may be headless, some of them may be mainstream in terms of like how they are being adopted.
Yeah, and I think I really appreciate our approach here where each agent will actually be in a secure way trained on specific data, so they'll actually get smart in the context of that business, leveraging them as well. So I'm sure that will definitely come through. It's great. I'm actually going to take a step back. We jumped right in. And I was so excited to talk to you. I was like, let's just dump in the deep end. I actually want to take a step back a little bit. To just ask you about your path to the topic of trust, your path to privacy, your path to responsible ad. Like, how did you end up in this role? Because, I mean, you got a fantastic history and career across like really interesting brands, organizations for many years, been developing and designing product for, again, many of those years. What kind of drove you in this direction? Was it accidental? Was it actually, I'm really passionate and this means a lot? Like, what is it that kind of pivoted your career in this direction?
No, that's a very good question. So I started my career as an intern in systems engineering for a startup called Vivissimo. It was back in Pittsburgh. And I would say they were one of the pioneers of enterprise search software. So very early on in my career, I got to see how search engines work, but also how search engines work within a particular enterprise where they have to have crawlers, which goes into like different databases, data warehouses, document stores to index all the content. And then like at the end of the day, there is a search box for employees of that organization to find any information they want. So that, from being an intern, I got a full-time job and then I became a associate product manager. So I would still attribute a lot of my success in my career to that role and to my ex-manager Stacy Lightwinger, who actually gave me that opportunity from being an IT intern to being a product manager. And in fact, it took me a week after she offered the job for me to take it because it was a big risk in my opinion. At that point, I didn't know what product management was.
Wow.
I didn't go to school for product management. So, as I was saying, like Stacy Lightwinger was my manager, took me as associate PM, coached me, trained me, and also gave me a lot of opportunities in terms of even building a new product line and I used to go to booths every month across US and pitch the product, like share the product, very early versions. And a lot of times when you're talking about data, the same principles I learned from that company 15 years ago applies even today. So that was number one. And then from Vivissimo, we got acquired by IBM and I spent a year and a half in IBM. And then I moved to eBay where again, I spent 4 to 5 years in building data platforms at eBay. And again, it's all about different forms of data warehouses, data lakes. But at the end of the day, how can we build tools to really get value from the data? So we build data catalogs, data lakes, and making sure that the folks who are using data every day are able to utilize the data that we were able to collect and store. So I was a product manager there at eBay. And then when the opportunity at Adobe popped up where Adobe wanted to build a new platform first of all, I didn't know Adobe had an Experience Cloud business when I joined 9 years ago. And I knew only Adobe Acrobat and Adobe Creative Cloud Suite, especially Photoshop. And then I came to know there is this amazing business unit where there is a lot of customer experience management use cases. But I think one of the key reason I joined Adobe was they were not only saying they want to build a platform. I was able to actually see that the investment was happening, and then the team went from 15 people to 300 people within 6 months of me joining Adobe Experience Platform. So in the formative years of AEP, I worked in product roles for data ingestion, insights, queries, you name it, right? There was only a few things that you could do with platform at that point. And then around the time where we wanted to build a data catalog, and bring in some of these governance principles that I learned from my previous roles into practice, and not only for Adobe, but how can we build our platform in a way that every customer across industry can make use of it. So API, extensible APIs, the labels are extensible, policies are extensible, the marketing actions that we have. So we followed some of the principles that were popular at that time. So, that's how I got into data governance as a practice and built that from day one. And then GDPR came in, and then that was a pivotal moment in terms of how do we get our applications to be more privacy centered with privacy by design principles. And our chief privacy officer at the time was very vocal and very supportive of our initiatives. So, me and my team started doing, what we call today the privacy service, able to serve data subject requests across different regulations. And then again, with maturity with our customers, with Adobe Experience Platform, we went after highly regulated industries like healthcare, financial services. So a lot of learnings from each and of our customers and how they allow us to build a roadmap. So that's how my career trajectory has gone. And I'm really looking forward to what responsible AI, because that's one of the key pillars of next stage of innovation. And I'm very happy to be here and learn from Ian, you and the whole industry and our customers, and how we can shape it together.
Yeah, awesome. I love hearing journeys like yours. And it's so fun to hear. I don't want to say random, but you never know where you're going to end up. You've got one idea, you come across a theme, a topic, and that sparks a bit of imagination or excitement. You're like, oh, actually, this is, because again, when we talk about privacy, governance, it's kind of it's very easy to think of as a boring topic. But when I talk to people about this topic who are in this, focus on this area, the amount of excitement they have for the future and what can be done now and into the future, it always really surprised me. And I love the fact that you've name dropped one of your, old managers, mentors, etc. Because again, that's another thing that I love hearing about, and it just takes one person to kind of go, you know what, I'll take a bit of a chance or a risk on you, but I think there's something in you. Let's go. Throw someone in the deep end and just watch them just absolutely, not just swim, just surf on the waves of innovation and stuff. So,
I'm very grateful and thankful to Stacey and also all the folks along the journey who kind of inspired me and also gave me the opportunity to grow and thrive in this career. So this was grateful. Yeah.
All right. But one last question. What does the future hold? What are you most excited about?
I think, and I really believe that to see the growth, the maturity that's needed in applying AI and bringing these agentic capabilities to mainstream, where every enterprise and the people within the company are comfortable in using the technology. They trust the technology. In my mind, that's an amazing next few years of growth and a lot of new ideas, new kind of thinking is needed. And especially as a product leader, it just opens up a lot of different opportunities in terms of I can go responsible AI. We can build the principles first, but how do we turn that into products and features and really make sure that the trust is not in the paper, but it can be actually transferred into an interaction. To me, that's a 5-year journey, and I'm very excited to do that at scale. It's an amazing opportunity.
Awesome. All right. Well, I'm really excited. And again, I very much appreciate being able to work with you, partner with you, learn from you. So again, thank you for everything you've done and will be doing.
Yeah.
Not just me and our customers, but for the broader society at large? Again, because I think one of the reasons I'm passionate about this topic is safeguarding individual humans.
Yeah.
And again, being able to innovate and, to your point, in a responsible way. So again, thank you for everything you're doing.
And thank you, Ian. And I would give a huge shout out to you because the passion that I saw in you when we were thinking of building the governance layer 5 years ago was there every single time that we have interacted in the past 5 years. And your the way you think about these problems is not just philosophical, but also you probe around. In fact, like I would highly recommend people to go read the blog and the article Ian wrote, like I would say 6 months ago, and because that goes into the details of privacy enhancing techniques, that goes into the details of how organizations are looking at it, how different geographies and different countries are coming up with regulations. I really appreciate that input, and then thank you for having me, and really appreciate this.
Yeah. I'll share with you actually a bit of a sneak peek where I'm working on the trust report, so that will be coming soon. So I'll share that with you soon, and I would love to get your.
I'll be downloading it on day one.
Well, I'd love to get your feedback and input ahead of time. So,
thank you.
With that, thank you so much, and I will speak to you soon. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.